Kathy here. Sweet. Awesome. So, hey, welcome in, everybody. I just pulled my camera out of the car as I came back from Death Valley. We had an awesome trip. The fact that Kathy's actually on here, that means she's probably made it. The last text I got from you, Kathy, was that you were still driving home. So, how's it going for you? How was your drive? Hey, Catherine DeLee is here from Las Vegas. Mammy Wilkes for Halifax, Nova Scotia. When I think of Nova Scotia, the first thing I think of course, as one of these American, nerds, is that I think of the Curse of Oak Island TV show. That's what really I know Nova Scotia for, and I don't know anything about Nova Scotia from the show, just that they're in Nova Scotia. So that's my interaction with Nova Scotia. But welcome in. David's here. And Robert Santillana. We got Luann, Kim, Mammy, Luann, Jean, Mammy. I'm just reading names since I keep getting over and over the same name. But Lori and Robert and Luann and Robert. And who else have I not mentioned already? Catherine. I haven't mentioned Catherine or Blake or Kathy and Jay. So welcome in, everybody. So we're going to go live right now. Help me out with a good share. I'm going to hit my share button as well, going over to Facebook. Because right now, Kathy and I were out in Death Valley, and we got skunked on our final night and had to fight back through weather. And even I had some crazy snow coming back through Utah. It was gnarly. I don't know, Kathy, did you have a gnarly time coming back? Because the snow, when we hit here, was so much more intense than I expected. I thought the bad days had passed and we weren't going to deal with any of that, but went into it. I even had my friend who's from Mexico who's never driven in snow driving. And so the whole time I was doing some lessons, like, okay, don't hit your brakes too hard. Don't gas too hard. Watch out for that lane. If you hit the white snow right here, we're probably going to lose traction, so stay a little bit more to the left. I mean, it was probably terribly annoying for her to have me talk about it constantly as we were going through, but she survived. We survived. Got to the we had 2 exits to try to get off so she could swap with me as driver. And the first exit we tried, there was an accident where a semi had gotten locked up and tipped, and we couldn't get off on that exit, so that didn't work out. So then we ended up having to go on the exit all the way in Cedar City, and that was a lot more of a drive, and she survived. She did really well. We were so focused on surviving, I didn't get any video of her doing it. I wish I had. Join me and Kristine over on the YouTube channel right now. Do we have any other shares that anyone else has done? If you're one of the students of Kristine, I noticed they'll have a Halifax, Nova Scotia name, someone who is from there. If you can share on your Facebook and get some more friends out here, let's have more people hanging out with us listening to Kristine talk today. Talking Milky Way and appreciating the night. I mean, I've read Kristine's bio, and looking at how she loves the night sky and getting out into nature, I think her and I are Zen buddies when it comes to that. And I think it's going to be fun hearing from her about what goes well, what doesn't go well sometimes, and what she savors about the night sky. I think a lot of us here will identify with what Kristine's going to talk about today. Kristine's one of the presenters over at the Nightscaper conference. If you guys haven't signed up yet, we're about to go live, nightscaper.com. Go check out that website and join us in May. We're going to be there from May 18th through 21st, but we have workshops leading into it, workshops every night that you can sign up for with your favorite photographers, and then do workshops afterwards. So it could be a 3-week Milky Way extravaganza for you if you plan it right. So hopefully you'll get yourself set up with a ticket so you can find your sleeping arrangements and then start planning your adventures. You know, the things that you're going to do instead of sleep in that hotel you just bought. Yeah, plan those and get out and do more. Talking Milky Way and the zen of being out in nature. Oh, yeah. As I was in Death Valley, I was just loving it. As we're walking around, the silence, the enjoyment. Oh, it was fantastic. Hello from Newfoundland. Hey, Newfoundland dogs. I've been wanting to have a Newfoundland all my life. I love those giant, drooly dogs. I mean, I'm a guy who's 5'4", so I think it might be a bit of a compensation issue where I want to have a giant dog, but I love them. They're freaking awesome. So let's see if anyone else has anyone shared. Shared. I see 3 shareds already with my shared. Oh, and a 4th one from Lori. Okay, cool. Let's go live. Let's bring in Kristine and let's get going on this event. Looks like my audio is turned off, so I won't have any double audio coming in. So let's get rolling. If anyone wants to join me in learning about Kristine Rose, here's the link to her website. I'm going to post it over here on the chat right now so you can read along with me. I'm going to go to Meet Kristine. And I'm going to read this. This is my favorite section of her entry, her intro to who she is. She goes, "Nature is my refuge." I realized how vital that connection to nature was when I grew up. Well, you know what? Maybe I should just start the show Let's start it. Let you see me in full screen real quick. So welcome in everybody. I'm Aaron King with Photog Adventures, and we're talking about the Nightscaper conference that's coming up in May. It's now almost March, so we have March and April, and that's it before really May 18th is going to be here around the corner. So if you haven't signed up yet for the Nightscaper conference, make sure you join us out there in Kanab, Utah, and do Milky Way photography. And tonight we're talking to another presenter at the conference, Kristine Rose, and I'm going to introduce you to her through her website that I've shared in the chat. And she says that nature is my refuge. I realized how vital that connection to nature was when I grew up. I moved to the city and lost easy access to it. I found that connection again in creating photographs of beautiful landscapes and of the stars. Oh, and I moved the heck out of the city. The silence at night is a balm to my busy mother of 2 young kids' soul. I love that line, Kristine. The balm, like the lip balm you do to heal your lips, to heal your heart and soul. When you go out in nature, I feel that. I actually went through a divorce in the process of starting this YouTube channel and teaching Milky Way photography. And as I was going through that divorce, Kathy can attest to it. In 2018, I had just started 5 workshops that we were going to sell, and I got a divorce. And I went to Death Valley in 2018, February. I was out there with some buddies, and they're like, Aaron, there's something different about you. Are you doing okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. But just so you know, when I come home from this trip, I don't have a home to go to. I left my wife, and I'll be going home to, I think, an Airbnb or a friend's couch. I hadn't even planned that far. Once the discussion happened right before I left on that trip, it was, well, I guess this is as good a time as any to separate. And I came back from Death Valley and a trip to the islands off of LA, those small ones, Santa Cruz and the Catalina Islands. And I came back from that trip and lived in my car and Airbnbs and friends' houses. And you know what? By the time I went out with Kathy in May in Escalante, we were out there with Nicole, Kathy, and Oh, no, forgive me. His name started with a V, and I can't pull it out right now. But forgive me, Brian. With you three, it was like a balm to my soul. I was going through a hectic, stressful time in my life, and I was out under the stars and enjoying teaching, and it really did heal me. All the times that I got home and went through the stress of the reality of all the divorce, and then I go out to the stars, and I go out and I learn, and I go out and experience them again, and it brought me back. So I love what she says here about how it's a balm, because she's a busy mother of 2 young kids, and she needed that balm for her soul. She says, the stars are a constant muse, providing both inspiration and perspective to my daily life. I create images to bring that connection with the cosmos home for everyone to experience. And I messed up one little thing. Everybody, I hope you haven't looked yet, because there's a graphic right here that's not saying Kristine Rose's name or face. I was saying Bryony. Okay, I fixed it down here. No one saw that. No one saw that. All right, let's bring her in. Let's bring in our guest tonight, Kristine Rose. Hey, Kristine, how's it going?
Hey, Aaron. It's going great. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm
nice
stoked
little
to
intro.
have you. Oh, well, you're welcome. I got a little emotional and personal there, but you're talking about how the night sky is like a healing ointment for you. It just hits home for me. So how long has it been that way for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere here in Nova Scotia. So I just spent a lot of time outside. And also, like, when you're a young kid and you're going to school far away and the bus ride's like an hour and a half home, even though it's only a 15-minute drive, you get home in the dark. So, like, I would be walking down my kilometer-long dirt road and looking up at the stars, because that's what it is in the winter. So a really long time. To say that I realized it, that only came after I had my son. So I had my first child, my son, in 2016. And so I started going out and taking photos because the only free time I had was when he was in bed. And I was like, well, I'm not getting sleep anyways. I may as well go out and take pictures of the night sky. I was like, I hear that people do that.
Right.
And so yeah. So maybe not the most sane decision to get less sleep with a newborn at home, but that's what started it all.
Oh my gosh, tell me about it. I mean, when you think about the sleep that you never get when you do that. I had a full-time job when I first started going out. I just had a daughter, and so I had plenty of that going on, and yet still, when it was around that new moon week, it was like, all right, give up your, sleep. And then I realized over time that I didn't have to wait for the new moon. I have 23 to 27 nights of every month that I can get out there. So didn't have to wait for that new moon, but it's funny how often we lose sleep. Kathy is one of those who likes to rally with us when we go out there, and she's constantly awake, constantly up for more action. So we understand it. So when I think about your life story out in Nova Scotia with 2 kids and doing photography, have you done most of your Milky Way photography out in that area? And if not, where do you usually go?
Yeah, I'm mostly local here to Nova Scotia. So I don't travel a ton. Just
Okay.
I don't want to be away from my kids. So mostly in Nova Scotia. Now I have spent some time in Arizona, and I like shooting in Arizona. And I was in Joshua Tree last year with a bunch of students, which was super, super fun. But for the most part, I'm shooting here. So Nova Scotia is a stunning, stunning province. So we're a peninsula, which means we're connected by this tiny little isthmus to the rest of Canada. And we have coasts all over. So I live on the South Shore, but we've got the South Shore, the North Shore, the Eastern Shore. We also have the highest tides in the world. So on the Bay of Fundy, we have the highest tides, which is like crazy, the amount of water that comes in and out. So we have a lot of really varied landscapes here. And then you can just go into the middle of the province and it's just like trees everywhere. So yeah, I just shoot all around Nova Scotia, and I can get to very different landscapes driving like 2 to 3 hours. And we've got, Bortle 2 places. I have a Bortle 2 that's just 2 hours away from me, but
Sweet.
I can drive a half hour and be at a Bortle 3 that's looking out at a
Well,
Bortle
that's
2.
that's enough. That's great.
Yeah. So that's what Nova Scotia is. We also don't have very many people. So, so it's
Nice.
great.
I'm looking at a map right now, and I have it sitting next to your face so that we all can get a little bit of our bearings. Most of us are
Yeah.
American, except for your students, which, by the way, shout out to your students. Are there any of them that were actually in the Joshua Tree workshop? Let us know in the chat. I'm curious if any of you were actually at her Joshua Tree workshop last year.
Oh, they
So
were.
I'm looking at this, and I guess I didn't realize how connected it is. I was thinking that around Amherst that it was just a disconnected island with a bridge, but Nova Scotia is a peninsula that comes off that has a mustache. A peninsula with
Yeah.
a mustache. It's so big. It doesn't have the typical peninsula where it just comes off as an arm and ends. It actually comes off and then has wings. And so with that set of breadth of land to travel on, are you looking at a bunch of dirt roads for your skies or paved roads right to the end?
It depends where you're at. So it definitely depends where you are. There's a lot of dirt roads in Nova Scotia, but there's a lot of paved ones too.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it just all depends where you're going and how rural it is.
Mm.
But we've got a lot of infrastructure near the coast because we have, I don't know how many lighthouses. I can't give you that statistic off the top of my head, but it's a lot.
Well, good,
So there
because
is a lot of infrastructure and stuff built just to be able to get to those places. So yeah.
right on. Kathy loves lighthouses, as most of us really do, but Kathy's got a list going that's almost up to 900, I think, or 700 to 900, somewhere in there, that she's counting all the lighthouse she visited. And I guess it sounds like if she gets up to Nova Scotia, she could really boost that list up to a high number. Looks like
Yeah.
Lori and Luann are here in the chat hanging out with us, and both of them went to the Joshua Tree workshop. So hello, shout out to Luann Williams and Lori Thomas. So
Well,
then,
and Bob is here too. I saw him in the
oh, you
chat.
saw Bob,
Robert,
yes.
but that's Bob.
Is that
Yeah.
Robert Santillana?
Yes, it
All
is.
right, Robert was there. I was in Joshua Tree, says, with Kristine last year. It was a wonderful
Yeah.
learning experience. And yes, Catherine DeLee says, I was there. Lots of fun, even with the clouds. Oh, no. You had a cloudy workshop too, huh?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
nights? All of them?
Yes, yeah. The second night, we saw a very short amount of Milky Way pop through, and everyone got really excited for the like 15 minutes that it came
Oh,
out.
oh man.
But yeah, I mean, these are people who I've been working and teaching with online for a couple years at this point. So to like be in person, at one point I was walking across the driveway and saying something. Someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I hear Kristine's voice." They're like, "This is so weird. It's real life." Anyways, so it was pretty freaking cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. It turns out Kathy's up to 580 lighthouses. I bloated her list by a couple hundred, but she's gonna
Well,
get
that's all
there.
right. I looked it up. So there are
Yeah.
over 170 lighthouses in Nova Scotia.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so just do a full
Yeah, we've got
circumference, like a good circuit, do a circuit around all of it on the 103, 101, and you'd probably see most of them. Sweet. So when I'm thinking about Nova Scotia, like if I ever wanted to go as a Milky Way photographer, what are you willing to share? What would be the place that we should definitely not miss if we get a chance to join you out there?
Mm. So probably the Bay of Fundy would be the place that you like 100% don't want to miss. That was the spot. Last year I did an in-person workshop. I'm not doing one here this year, but I did last year, and everyone wanted to go to the Bay of Fundy. So
Where
you
is
would
that? I'm
probably,
looking at it on the map. Bay of Fundy. What?
yeah. So think about Nova Scotia. There's like a 7, and then there's like a 6, and that's Cape Breton. But the 7 inside the little inlet of the 7, like the top where the inside of the triangle would be.
Oh, I'm trying to see that, but I'm not seeing it yet.
You
Would it
don't see
be,
the
what
7.
cities would it be close by?
It's close to Wolfville,
Oh,
Kentville,
okay. I'm looking at
that
that
area.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in
Minas
that area,
Basin.
it's coming in through like the Gulf of Maine and then coming in. That's called the Bay of Fundy, or we call it the
Ah,
Fundy Shore. So highest tides in the world there. You can go
really?
and basically walk on the ocean floor, which like you can always do that, but this is ocean floor that's like 40 feet underneath water
What?
12 hours later. So
Wow.
that particular area is really, really cool. You would look up a place called Burnt Coat Head. That's no, I didn't share a photo from Burnt Coat Head. I did share one from Medford Beach. I wouldn't recommend doing that one unless you're a local because there's a cliff that you can fall off very
Ah,
easily.
okay.
Um, yeah. In fact, the first time that I went there, my dog fell over the cliff, 40 feet, sheer drop to the bottom.
Um,
Not a good night. She's
no.
okay.
She's okay though.
She's okay. Miraculously, she legitimately fell over the cliff. I tell this story as like a safety thing in a lot of
Ah.
my classes to be like, hey, I always say go somewhere and scout during the day first. This one time I didn't do it. And it's because so during the pandemic, we had these crazy lockdowns where it's like you don't leave your neighborhood. If you can't walk to the place, you don't go to it. And so it's just after this that we were like finally allowed to go to provincial parks and go places. Um, but I wasn't going and doing a lot of stuff because everyone's like, okay, we're going to stay home. We're going to do this. And there was a clear night. And so a friend and she had been to this place before, but we found a new way to go there that required less hiking, which was ideal. But we went there at night for the first time and we thought we were still on the path, but the path just ends in a cliff. And my dog went right over.
Oh my
Uh,
gads.
yeah, not a good night. Not a good night.
No, no.
Yeah.
How did you recover your puppy?
So we ran back to where we saw the trail. We ran down, and she's there, and she's a black lab. Her name is Jazz, and
Okay.
she's kind of like yelping, and she's in a little corner. And so we got her back up to the car, and then it was an hour and a half drive to the emergency vet, and she was there until the morning, and then was better. She had a little bit of internal bleeding, and that was it.
Just a
Like,
little bit of internal bleeding. Wow,
yeah,
your dog is a freaking champ. So
she
Jazz
is.
did really well, and I'm imagining that. I mean, Kathy and I had experience with her dog where her dog got really close to an edge of a cliff that was sloping, and I think my heart still hasn't recovered. So I can't imagine that you go there without having that nightmare repeated over and over and over again.
Well, I kind of purposely like erased it. So she and I went back there to do a full moon shoot and we went
Okay.
really early and like we scouted early and I have pictures of her just like rolling around at the base of the cliff because she didn't care. She's like, yeah, I'm out. I can roll in mud. So that helped. And I've been back there now multiple times. But that spot is not as accessible. It's a really cool spot, but it's not as accessible and safe as opposed to Burnt Coat Head, which is a provincial park. So they have a lot of signage, they have stairs, they have, things that help you from not falling off cliffs.
Yeah, right on. That's pretty key. Oh my God. So I know that safety is always first and paramount, but I know I put my workshop attendees into some situations that they look back on and gone, Aaron, why'd you do that? Like, because the picture was so good. So I'm looking at Nightscaper Conference. We have a question from the audience that I want to address while I also ask you, what are you teaching at Nightscaper Conference?
Yeah, so I've got two workshops, and one of them is on business of photography
Cool.
and night photography, and the other one is on night photography as art specifically.
Oh, night photography as art. So dealing with what art procedures or executions, what are you going to talk about with art?
More so the mindset of the going into it not as just photography or not as just science or representation, but more as going into it with an artistic vision. And that kind of also leads into the business class because my ethos around making money as a photographer is not identifying as a photographer, it's identifying as an artist who's using photography as their medium.
I like that. You're an artist and a photographer, and I'm a teacher and a photographer. So I like that a lot. That's where I make my money is as a teacher. So I feel you. Ryan, for your question, does the conference include photo opportunities in Utah or just a conference? It includes photo opportunities galore as long as you don't like sleep, and you'll get plenty of opportunities. So with specifically workshop attendees, you can go anywhere you want, or you can go with a very specific person. Like myself, I'm offering a North Rim workshop, then a Mary Beth and Coral Pink Sand Dunes workshop, then a North Rim workshop again on one of the one-nighters. Are you doing any yourself, Kristine?
Yeah, I am. Mine are exclusive to my students who are in my Milky Way photography masterclass.
Oh, yeah?
I have a solid group. So we have two Airbnbs that are nearby, and I need to count, but I think I've got about 20 people. And
Sweet.
we looked, I kind of was like, okay, I can do it where it's like only so many people together on one night and we space it out, or we can all go out together every night. And everyone's like, let's do that. So it's going to be a party.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So anyone
Yeah.
who's
I'm
not
really,
already in it can't be in it. It's very exclusive. So if you're one of those students that are with us tonight, you're the ones that can benefit. Sweet. Awesome. So Ryan, anybody who's thinking about going to the conference, jump in and get your ticket and expect to have many, many, many hours of photography, which is what makes it so great. Is you get that chance to go out and actually practice and execute the things that you learned that day in the presentations and put them into practice fast enough that you have them in your muscle memory and you know what you're doing and you can practice them with someone like myself or Kristine if you were in her special class. And then you can, figure out how to do it and master it. So speaking of mastering Milky Way photography, I want to see some of yours. Would you have a favorite to start with? Should we go with Medford Beach to start us off?
yeah. Since we were talking about the falling off of the cliff, that would be great. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what I am showing everybody. And then I
Lovely.
am going to make you much larger so everyone can still enjoy seeing you as you talk about these. And here we go. So this is the first picture, Medford Beach. I'm going to try and I'm going to give it a little bit more space and room on the screen as I felt like I was cropping off the top there. Let's see this. Yeah, it's cropped off a tad. I'm going to move some things around, making sure that the live stream sees and benefits from everything that you have here. So let's, oh, hey, there's me. What's up? Medford Beach area. Is this Medford Beach? Actually, I don't know. Is this in Nova Scotia?
Yes, this is.
All right, on. And tell us about these. Now, when I go and approach some of these Milky Way shots, I like to talk about what went well and what didn't go well. So first off, give us the what went well and your procedure for capturing this shot and your thought process. And then I'm going to try and, needle some of your what didn't go wells out of you.
Yeah. So the thing with this particular area, what you're seeing in the white is ice. So that is the two high tide marks. And if I was there for scale, they would be well above my head.
Really?
If I'm standing over there, it's like 2 to 3 of me to get to that bottom one.
Oh, that's much bigger.
So yeah. So these sandstone here basically are carved out by the Bay of Fundy coming in and out. And you need to plan the heck out of this. So you can go basically 3 hours before and after low tide. And now that's only going to be certain times of the year, in certain times of the month. And then it has to line up with the moon cycle and then also cloud. So for anyone who doesn't know, Nova Scotia is actually is Nouvelle Ecosse or New Scotland. We get very similar weather to Scotland.
Dang.
We
not.
get a lot of clouds, a lot of clouds. And if, if it's not clouds, it's fog, or there's just because it's ocean. So actually getting a clear night that lines up with the moon cycle and the tides is the first thing to actually have it happen. You might get 1 to 2 nights a month if you're lucky when it's actually going to happen.
No way. Ouch.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, when we were planning these shots, I've got like post-it notes that like these are the nights when we can make it work with the tides, and we don't push it because safety is the number one thing.
Right.
We're not going to be here late and have the tide coming in and stuff. Like when you are in these locations and you see the tide come in, it's pretty epic. So that's the very first thing. In terms of like planning out the shot, so this is a tracked sky. So I believe it's a 2-minute tracked sky.
Cool.
Now, I'm not tracking the sky from the exact same position because you get the rocks going over everything. So I'm actually moving out farther from the rocks to track my sky in this particular shot. While I was out there, I also set up my portable LEDs. So the formation here that you're seeing is being lit by portable LED panels that I have. They're very far out. Like it feels like you're walking out and you don't know. It's like, is the ocean just going to rush up at me at some point?
Right.
Etc. So I'm capturing the Milky Way from over there, tracked, and then coming back and doing the foreground, a long exposure foreground with the LED panels here. And that's kind of the technical on it all. If we're to talk about the issues, well, you would notice the ice. The ice is there for a reason because it's winter and it's really cold.
Oh man.
So imagine doing all of this with the cold wind coming in off the bay, off the ocean. And it's freezing, like literally, freezing out. So yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, it's both wonderful and terrible at the same time. The wonderful outweighs the terrible, but yeah.
With Canada, I was hearing that there wasn't a summer at all. It was just winter year round. That's what I thought.
That's fine. We live in igloos here. It's fine. Yeah.
Exactly. There's nothing else. I mean, we're looking at this. You don't see any snow, but it's just frigid. Do you think this was February, March? Do you know when you were out there?
This was March.
March.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't see snow because this area the tide is coming in and out.
So it's always washing away any snow that comes through.
Yeah, there's no snow that you would see here.
Okay.
So yeah, but as you're up farther, and you're like hiking in, there was snow. Yeah.
Right on. I'm loving this. The way you captured at 2 minutes. What are your typical lenses and settings? 'Cause I'm thinking your clarity on the core with your tracker is just brilliant, and I'm loving the look of it. The dust lanes are just popping.
Thanks. Yeah. So my gear, my cameras are Nikon. I've a variety. This was probably shot on a 750. I also have a 780 and a Z5. I don't believe this was shot with my Astro mod though. I have a 750 that's Astro modded for H alpha, and I have my Z5 as a full mod. I don't think this was shot with either of those though. I did have a 750 that was not modded before as well. So I think it was just regular, like stock camera, 2 minutes. This is using a 35 millimeter. Most of what I do are longer focal lengths. I'll say that. Now, one of the images I've included today is a 14. But
Okay.
most of what I do are using slightly longer focal lengths. I like to shoot 24, 35, 50 with primes. And I will track for the sky. Sometimes I track and stack. It depends how cold it is.
Yeah, right.
and what's going on. In March, there's not a ton of time with the Milky Way as well before we're getting into astronomical twilight. And then the other thing that I do mostly because I use longer lenses is I tend to do vertical panoramics as well. So I'll tend to do like a one frame for the sky, and then I'll pan down and shoot my foreground. This is just one frame for the foreground. Sometimes I'll do multiples and stitch them together, but it just depends how much I want in there. But I really like, my thing is I love seeing color And I love seeing the detail and having the Milky Way bigger. So I like to use the longer lenses for that, which means I'm always lugging around a couple trackers with me.
Yeah, I bet. Well, I'm going to hit you up with a hard question, but it might be a very easy one to answer, knowing that you have a Milky Way master class. So you may have this tip right on your cuff. But when you get in these situations, a lot of people will ask questions about the composition. They'll be curious about what they need to prioritize, what they need to think about, how to avoid a bad composition, especially when you have conditions working for you. You're in an awesome place. You can have composition paralysis. You're like, how do I make this amazing? So what would be two of your favorite tips that help people who are beginners can handle their composition and try to make it so that it is a strong one in the end, that when they come back at the computer and see it later, they don't regret something about it?
Yeah. So my first tip is going to be, and if at all possible, go to the place during the day. Now, this just isn't a safety thing. This is a like get your bearings. Because if you're showing up somewhere in the dark, even if you're just showing up at like sunset, it's still like, you know what? You don't have a lot of time. You're trying to get your bearings. You're trying to see everything. And you're experiencing it all for the first time. And
Yeah.
it is difficult when you have all of this input and you're trying to figure out like what's the best look, etc. So I like to go to places always before I'm going to shoot there, bring my actual gear with me. I know it's a pain in the butt. You're going on a scouting trip and you've got a backpack full of gear,
Yep.
but actually like put your lens on and mess around, because being able to take a 1/250th of a second test shot during the day is way better than waiting for like a 5 to 10 second test shot at night, only to be like, that's not quite right. Like, let's move a little bit, and then just get frustrated because you're like, what am I doing in the dark?
Right.
If you can't do that, I recommend doing as much Google research as possible. And that's like Instagram research and reaching out to people who have been there, trying to do as much beforehand so that you get a feel for the place. So I mentioned earlier that I don't really travel a ton. Not that I'm against travel, but just with small children and them, it would not be fun to bring them with me.
Yeah.
I like to be around home. I also like to go to places multiple times and be in places because I get more of a feel for what that place is and what draws me to it. And that leads me to my second tip, which is have an understanding of why you're creating the images. And I know this is maybe not like a typical tip. It's not like a, place these objects here, have a strong thing, but it's more so about like, what's the actual reason? Like, why are you drawn to this place? And actually think about what is it that I'm trying to communicate with people? And when you start to ask yourself those kinds of questions, it starts to become apparent the types of elements and things that you should be bringing into your image. And that in itself is going to give you a better outcome than just trying to get the best shot, because the best shot for me is not going to be the best shot for you. Like, we're all coming at
Right.
it from a different perspective.
Absolutely awesome. I love it. I knew that you would have those off the cuff, and you did fantastic. Let's go into
Thanks.
another one of your compositions. I think I want to play around with this one because it's very similar to this one, but you had a little bit more success on having a reflection. Let's see if it'll take up too much room, and it does. Let me bring this one in. So this is your Clam Harbor. I guess I really love showing that picture of me. Let's go Clam Harbor again. So Clam Harbor shot. Tell us about this one, about what really went well.
Yeah, the reflections. The reflections were beautiful. This is in an area that's a Bortle 2. And it's a couple hours drive from me. This is also very early in the season. When was this? Was this in, I think it was in March as well. No, this was actually April. But early April. So this is the type of shot where it's like we got up at like 1 a.m. or something and drove for 2 hours to get there and be there. And it was freezing. It was freezing, freezing cold. But for me, I love, love, love reflections. Like, reflections are probably my favorite thing if I can incorporate them into an image, because it's like a tangible thing that you can actually reach down and feel and touch. And it's this light that's far away. Like, when we take these pictures of space, it's like, it's out there, it's not part of us. We're in it, but we're apart from it. But now this light is actually here. It's tangible that that light is there on that water. I can reach down and touch that water, and the light is touching the water. And so for me, reflections in the images are a very tangible representation of that. But you can't always see it. Like, it's sometimes you're out at a really dark spot and then you get the Milky Way reflecting in the lake, but you can't really see it here because this particular area where they're at low tide, it's got a lot of sandbars that go out for quite a distance. So there's really shallow water coming through, and then you've got the really light sand underneath. So it's reflecting back up. So I could literally see all of the reflections as we're there. I'm like dancing around from foot to foot because I'm cold and because I could watch the reflections of the stars in the water while I was shooting. So that probably for me is the coolest thing about this photo.
I had an experience where I was in the salt flats with water about an inch high, and I was standing in the water to capture the shot, and I know what you felt. I had that feeling like I could reach down and touch the Milky Way that was reflecting at my feet, and the fact that it was on, I was standing in it, it was a moment of just transcendence. I was like, I am the Milky Way. I'm living in it, and it was just such an amazing, magical experience. So I feel you there. A quick comment from the chat. Jay Frederick, yes, we're seeing you, man. He says, hey, Teach, intermittent internet here. Hope you can see this. You sound and look as amazing as usual. So Jay is stoked, and he loves reflections too. And Jay Jeffries says, hey, Jay, great to see that you were here. So two Jays know each other, but there can be only one. So Jay Frederick and Jay Jeffries, you guys work that out. So with this shot, was there anything that didn't go well? Anything that was hard that you had to overcome?
Well, it was not necessarily, it didn't go well, but you can see the clouds on the horizon.
Yeah.
And so we got in there and we shot the core really quick because it was like, what are you doing, clouds? Are you
Yep.
Are you coming up? You're in the wrong spot.
Fortunately,
they did not cover. They came in more, but they didn't cover. They didn't cover the whole sky. Yeah, so that was a nice thing. One thing that didn't go well, not for me, but I have two students of mine who are local and are friends now. One's friends before he ever took my class. He came and he gets out of the car and he looks at us and he says, "Oh, I won't swear on here." And he's like, "I didn't bring my camera bag."
Wait, nothing? Like
nothing.
No.
Nothing. And I offered, I had an extra camera that he could shoot with, and we offered, but he was just too upset with himself. He was just like, no. So he went back. And then he came back here to shoot, and there was a bear the time he came back to shoot by himself. So
he had to kill the bear first in order to take the shot.
That's obviously what we do here in Canada. Yes.
Yeah, of course. He wrestled it down like the Sasquatch in those beef jerky commercials. Okay, so then that kind of thing is funny. And everyone who's listening right now and watching, you have to convince your emotions to deal with that situation, because every workshop there is someone whose camera was like, no, I don't want to do this. And you're like, no, do this. You're like, no, I don't want to do this right now. And that can ruin days sometimes for your workshop, let alone that night, because you're fighting so hard with that camera. So if you can just somehow separate your emotions from the success of your camera working the first time, let alone after an hour of fighting with it, because it can get so aggravating and it can kill your opportunity to really enjoy that night. And I get it. I could be there too. I'd probably be just like your workshop attendee going, I'd rather just go home and deal with this than borrow someone's camera, because I feel so frustrated. So I know that feeling, but if you can avoid it, just try, because that happens all the time, and it's hard to get over that. It is really hard. When I'm looking at this and your compositional tips that you were talking about, you really live by the mantra of bringing in your foreground and carrying it into your image just as important as the sky. I love your focal lengths that you're choosing. Very often, I don't capture with these focal lengths. I capture very wide, and in your two images I've seen so far, it gets me more and more excited about using that kind of focal length. Do you find yourself having a difficult time getting a foreground to work with you when you go that tight, even just 35?
No, because I do vertical panoramics so that I can shoot more. Like here, I've got a frame for the sky, and then I've panned down and I've done multiple frames to stack for the foreground.
Gotcha.
So like if I was only doing one, you would basically get to like the little reflection of water that's along the top, and that would be it. Like that's one frame. But if you were doing this and you weren't tracking and you wanted to just you wanted like a whatever you're going to use as your panoramic stitching software. So if you're going to use Lightroom or Photoshop or PTGUI, if you're using those and you want them to automatically stitch it, you would do 3 shots here. So you do like a shot of the sky, then a half sky, half foreground, and then foreground. But where I'm manually putting stuff together anyways, because I'm tracking the sky, I don't need to worry about that. So I'm manually aligning and masking and whatnot.
Right on. People are going to wonder, what's your favorite tracker gear that you find is like one you would recommend to everyone?
Yeah, that depends on what your goals are. So, like, I didn't include any here, but I also really enjoy doing deepscapes. So, where you're focusing in with a longer focal length on one object and getting that rising or setting over a landscape. I don't do just typical deep sky objects. I think they're really cool, but my work is more about that connection between the landscape and the sky together. So, because of that, I need something that can hold the gear. So my main tracker is the Skyguider, the Ioptron Skyguider Pro, but I also have the Ioptron Sky Tracker, which is the smaller one, and I love it. I use that mostly for all my Milky Way stuff because it's not as heavy. On my bigger tracker, the Skyguider Pro, I have the William Optics High Latitude Base. Fantastic base, but my gosh, is it a beast? Like, it's so heavy. So if I'm being lazy, I'll just bring my sky tracker out and just shoot with that. I do also have a move shoot move as well. I hardly ever use it. I love their innovations that they have. I love using the laser. Like, the number one tip for anyone who's getting a track, doesn't matter what tracker you're getting, get a laser as long as it's within the regulations of wherever you live to use it, because it makes polar alignment like so quick. So quick. But I don't enjoy the move shoot move itself. There's just things about it that I find aren't produced that well. And I have a background. I spent over 11 years as a product designer, a toy designer, and photographer as well. So I have a background in manufacturing. So there's some things that just kind of, I'm like, this could be better.
Yeah.
And that's
so many things.
Yeah. So, because of that, I really like the Ioptron. That being said, I will likely be purchasing the Star Adventure, the one that has the go-to functionality, because sometimes when I'm doing deep sky stuff and it's like, I'm shooting the Veil Nebula, which is all hydrogen alpha. And if you're trying to see it on your like LCD, it's like, is it this light gray? Am I sure that's right? And it's just like, are these stars the right ones? And it's just like, takes forever. So to have that go-to functionality would be really nice. But it's been out of stock for a while in Canada. So I just I wait for like stock notifications. So I don't know. I'll probably have that at some point.
Okay, cool. You're getting people thinking about star trackers. And Hillary says, I got to learn my tracker so I can shoot those focal lengths. She's really excited about it. And Angelo asks, does a star tracker, this is a newbie question, he says, does that allow you to get that lighter foreground? Or, what are you doing to make sure your foreground isn't so dark like his typically are?
Yeah, so the tracker will be separate from your foreground. And I love the question. So when the tracker is running, any foreground element will be blurry. So when your tracker is on and running, it's just your sky. But the thing that happens when you start to shoot with a tracker is that you are now always shooting your foreground and your sky separately. And that's really key, because if we think about exposing for the sky, and just in like terms of photography in general, when we expose for the sky is actually our light source. If there isn't other stuff around, like other light pollution or like a cabin with lights or street lights or whatever it is, if there's none of that around, then the sky is our light source. If we think about during the day and you photograph the sunset and you're exposing for the sunset, your foreground is dark because you're exposing for the light source. It's the same thing with the sky at night. We just don't really think about the Milky Way being a light source, even though it is. So when we expose for that, when we expose for the stars, our foreground is going to be dark. So in order to get a lighter foreground, you need to have additional light. So maybe a moonrise or moonset, or doing low level lighting or light painting. You need to have some type of additional light on your foreground If you don't have that, then you need to take a second photo for your foreground. And that could be a blue hour shot, it could be a starlit, whatever you decide to do. When you're shooting with a tracker, you always have to take a second shot for the foreground, because otherwise you're going to have a blurry foreground. So you are already working in that frame of mind. My images for my foreground are generally starlit. So generally they are longer exposures, in the 4 to 8 minutes for most of my foregrounds. Sometimes when I'm in a crazy dark place, it'll be about 15 minutes. And they're much longer exposures for my foreground. So, when you're thinking about getting your foreground brighter, you have to think about separating it from your shot with the sky.
And when you're going for that longer foreground shot, everybody, try and get your aperture to be the widest that it possibly can. The big and open aperture makes it easier on you. We know we were out at Factory Butte going for that long exposure foreground shot, but hanging out at 2.8, and my client needed 16 minutes to get something that was going to be bright enough, but even then it wasn't very clean. Where on a much more open aperture at much less time, Eric Benedetti was pulling out a fantastic foreground shot, and it's just the benefit of that is huge. So play around with it, put on your gear, and do that longer exposure shot. Do you have any recollection of what maybe you did for this one, how long you had to capture?
Yeah, so this one is a little bit different, because with that really long exposure, you're not going to get the reflection that you see there. So the foreground here is a little bit more complex because of that reflection. It's not a photoshopped reflection. I will sometimes do that if it's necessary for how I shot. Maybe I screwed something up, and it's what needs to be done. So here, the foreground is an 8-minute shot. However, there are also 20-second photos at f1.4 stacked for the reflection, specifically for the foreground. So I took one really long exposure, and then I took these 20 shots to stack the reflection of the stars, and then masked those together. So the stacked image and then the long exposure image were masked together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That turned out really well. With the stack on your reflected image, it doesn't look like it's like that at all. It's fantastic. It turned out. Yeah. Awesome. With this kind of a foreground, say in Polly's Cove, you have some rocks that maybe are reflecting the light pretty decently, but you often will have a dark and dingy foreground with something like this. How did you capture here? What did you do to make this one look so awesome?
Polly's Cove. This is just starlight. It's long exposure. Now, we did come to get the setting moon, but it didn't come early enough.
Oh, no.
So there was still, for the foreground shot, there was still a little tiny bit of light from the moon bouncing around, but not enough to make a huge difference. The moon was setting. It hadn't set yet when I started shooting these, but it wasn't a big moon. It was a crescent, and it was setting, over and behind us. So there's a teensy bit of that light reflecting around, but this is just long exposure. Now, this is shot with a 35 millimeter again, but I'm doing a panoramic here as well. So it's kind of like a multi-row panoramic. So for the sky, it's 2 frames. No, 3, because I wanted to have enough overlap. 3 frames across. And then the foreground is 3 frames in the bottom, and then going up on the left-hand side, 2 frames going up. And so those were longer exposures. Those were 8-minute exposures with starlight to basically get the foreground. So that took a while to shoot the foreground, and then waited for the Milky Way to come up, and then shot my tracked.
Right on.
Track sky.
Quick question on this. I mean, I mentioned the Factory Butte example, but the reason why we had to go for a big wide open aperture is because Factory Butte is so far away. But a subject like this that is nice and close, it would be something that'd be interesting to stop down your aperture and actually use something a little sharper. Do you tend to do that with 8 minutes long? It sounds like maybe you have.
No, this is shot at f2.8.
It actually is. Awesome.
Yeah. So if you actually look, like the foreground there is that's close, is out of focus, and then we're getting it to be in focus. Now I pull my focus back I don't
Okay.
focus at infinity on the stars here. I pull it back as much as I can, so that I'm getting. I don't use hyperfocal distance. I don't trust that, but I do test shots and pull my focus back a little bit. But yeah, this is shot at f2.8. I do like, when possible, to shoot blue hour foregrounds so that I can shoot at f8 or f11, and only have a 1 minute or less
Right.
shot for each of the panels. But blue hour also tends to be when my kids are doing things like bedtime, and my husband is great, but if I was always gone, it'd be a little bit of an issue. So yeah.
Understood. It
Yeah.
turned out really strong. I mean, I love how some rocks will really just reflect the starlight back at you and look as
Mhm.
if it's just the thing about doing this in full darkness too is that the blend between that and the sky is much easier to work with. You don't have to
Yeah.
try and bring in light into the sky to try and match with the really, really bright foreground. And these rocks are highly reflective and showing off light terrifically. And
Yeah.
so you're getting something that looks crazy strong. So it's just 8 minutes on that tripod running a few frames and doing that panel you were talking about, and you
Yeah.
nailed the shot. So then when you think about the post-processing of this image and the previous one, here's a question coming from Charles. He goes, do you think, Kristine, about the complexity of the horizon and how it relates to being able to separate and blend later on?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So Photoshop and I are besties. I have a Photoshop class as well. I run it once a year in the off season. It's called Photoshop 101, for Milky Way photographers. And the biggest thing is getting your selections and doing your masking. And so I do think about that. However, I don't let it stop me. I have an image here. I didn't send it here, but I have this image called the ice tree, and it is a lone tree on the top of a hill after an ice storm in the winter.
Cool.
And the masking on that is just insane.
A
It's actually the
nightmare.
same tree that I did. It's the second apod that I got. If anyone wants to look it up, they can look up Sister of Mars and they'll see it. But it's a conjunction between the Pleiades and Mars, and this lone tree on the hill. I spent 8 hours just with my Wacom, just going in and fixing things, because it was just the degree of difference between the tree and the sky and behind it on the long exposure for the foreground just wasn't enough. Like there was no selection making capacity. So I do take into consideration what's going on in the foreground. What I generally will actually do or change is with relation to positioning of the tracker. Like if I have something that is in the middle of my frame over my sky, I'm going to see if I can get around that thing to shoot the sky, because I don't want to be clone stamping parts of the Milky Way, because I'm never going to do a good job of it. So that's the thing that I generally pay the most attention to. And then at this point, I might just curse myself a little bit later when I'm sitting down to edit out all the trees. But I still do it because it's the shot that I want.
Fair enough. I'm going to pull that up real quick because I found it and it does look awesome. And so
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead. This is an APOD, which means Astronomy Photograph of the Day. So Astronomy Photograph of the Day is APOD, APOD. And so that means that NASA specifically, who picks it? Who's the organization?
Yeah, it's NASA. It's
NASA
people
picks
within
it.
NASA. Yeah.
And they rated it the best one of that day, and Kristine won it. And looking at these, I won't give it away. Why do you call it Mars and the Sisters, or Sisters of Mars?
Sisters of Mars, because the Pleiades are the seven sisters. Yeah. So Subaru were the seven sisters, because of the seven bright stars. But yeah.
Over
Yeah.
on
And then
over on KristineRosePhotography.com, everyone can check out this link. I'm going to give it to you in the chat, but this is her having an actual write-up of each of the stars that make up the Pleiades as well as Mars, so you can identify what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So did this tree stand out for this night, or did you have a plan to come back to this tree someday with something interesting behind it?
Oh yeah. So this tree is like just down the road from where I grew up.
Oh,
So it's just a tree that we know. There was another tree which we, funnily enough, call the tree, that actually was just taken down by a hurricane in September. I just did a presentation on my work locally with the lieutenant governors here, and I put up the picture of the tree, and there was like gasps in the crowd, and people being like, "Oh!" So this is like the other tree, but people don't know this one as much. It's literally in a farmer's field in the middle of nowhere. I just happened to have grown up down the road from it, so I knew it well. So when you're looking at things like this particular event happening with the Pleiades and Mars and the conjunction, and it's like, okay, well, looking at it and being like, okay, at 200 millimeters, this is kind of the composition you're going to get. It would be nice if there was like another element. So then you're just like, I'm scrolling around on Planet Pro and being like, all right, what lines up? And then being like, oh, I can go on the farm road here and I can shoot this at Vinegar Hill. So yeah.
That's glorious. This is the kind of thing that I am finding myself more and more fond of, where you have a telephoto lens taken in a subject, but that same telephoto lens really draws in detail from a very, very distant cosmos subject. Mm-hmm. For instance, Mars is massive here, and you see the Pleiades with even the dust clouds that make up the Pleiades out there in that nursery of stars. So as you're looking at this and seeing the detail of the blue wispy clouds, that's because this is what focal length?
This is shot 200 millimeters. It's cropped a bit, not a lot, but shot at 200
millimeter. That's awesome. And tracking with the big guy.
A lot of people will have like the 70 to 200 millimeter. Mm-hmm. And so I shoot with that a lot. I have that from my pet photography days. It was a really solid pet photography lens. But it's just a Nikon 70 and 200 lens, and at 200 millimeters is great. Yeah.
Such great detail on the Pleiades. This whole situation.
It was about maybe an hour shooting on them.
Did you stack several or get some really long exposures? Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And this particular night was also super windy, so I had to use my car as a blind.
Park it in the right strategic spot. Yeah. Sweet. So everybody, before we're done with tonight's presentation, think about your final questions that you'd like to ask Kristine. If you'd like to have any questions for her, check out nightscaper.com below and make sure you get your ticket so that you can watch Kristine present her 2 courses. She's teaching on artist and the business of selling your photography, or a business as a photographer. How did you phrase that?
Yeah, both. Either one.
All right, sweet. Yeah. So come to that presentation, and if you do, join me and Ryan Tyre that's out there. You're going to enjoy having great nights of photography as you're out there as well. You're going to be out in Kanab area in southern Utah, where the dark skies are everywhere. Other than dealing with Paige, you have nothing to worry about when it comes to light pollution, and it is brilliant. And so I hope to see all of you there in person, and we can get more at the Nightscaper conference. Check out the website down below. Okay, I'm going to pull up your last image, and we're going to have all the Q&A that anyone wants to ask. Is there chance now? So think about your question, everybody, and then we'll let Kristine go back to the aurora that's happening in Canada right now. You think you might go out, or is the moon too much of a fun suck?
I'm going to text my friend who's in the woods right now and see what's going on. There was some color earlier, but then I heard that it was dying down a bit. So we'll have to see.
Okay. In Canada, you have your auroras that we can't quite get here, especially in Utah, only rarely. So don't want to make you miss it. So this area is Cape St. Mary's. This one looks like the kind of terrain that you would capture with a blue hour or bust, as the grasses right below might be really tough on a very long exposure. What did you do for this one?
Yeah, blue hour for the foreground, very end of blue hour. So this is a minute long. And, a lot of times blue hour, you can be getting a lot shorter than that. So yeah, this was blue hour. The other reason to hear that we're shooting blue hour is it's very dangerous.
Good to be on that cliff.
So yeah. It's this is me shooting 14 millimeters here on this, doing a vertical pano as well. But yeah, we shot our foregrounds at blue hour, and then we backed up off the cliff to shoot the sky shots. I have another photo as well. I just don't quite like it as much because it's high tide, so there's less of the like impact of it in that particular image, but you see the little like peak that's going down. I was actually standing out on that edge, and it's like a little 2-foot thing, and it's like 60-foot drop on either side.
Like right here, or even lower?
Even lower, yeah, down there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But you can't see the scale in the image because it's high tide. So it's like, It's the type of thing where I still love the image, but I think this one has more of that scale, which is nice. But this is also very close to the edge. Like you see the edge of the grass there, that's erosion and just going down. So you can't really, like I'm on the other side of the rope here. So yeah, these are definitely blue hour shots. We left really early. This is a fair hike to get here. This is actually the westernmost point in Nova Scotia. Funnily enough, it's overlooking towards the Gulf of Maine.
Oh,
But we left really early so we could come and scout here during the day. And then we came back. We went, got some supper, had a really good seafood. You know, it's good seafood when you can see the fishing boats from the restaurant that you're staying in. And
yeah.
then it's really good. And then we came back here for blue hour and did all our blue hour shots. So I started my blue hour shots out on that ledge, and then I worked my way back for it. Yeah.
Man, this is an area that I would like to take people that would be so mad at me for doing it because it's so scary, but this is gorgeous. How
It's
well
stunning.
did you plan out the timing for the Milky Way core to be like that vertical line directly out at that point as our eyes are following through the grasses and going around this curve? We're drawn right into that perfectly center weighted Milky Way. Is that precision right here planned with a specific app?
Yeah, so we this particular spot has been on our radar, myself and a couple students and friends
Yeah.
who go out shooting together. It's been on our radar. I know a photographer who is from down around this way and has photographed quite a bit there. So I've looked at all the lines and the things and everything. And this was not the composition that I had originally envisioned. And it's funny how sometimes that happens. It's like it's either the first image you take or the last image you take. And this was the last one that I took before waiting for full dark to come. And it was just like, oh, this does line up like perfectly. So yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny how you say that. We so often will have several pictures taken, and it is always that first one you took was the best or the last one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely true. I'm not getting any last minute questions for you, so I'm going to ask one myself to carry on. If everybody, this is our last couple minutes. It's now 7:07. I will keep Kristine on until 7:10. Her time, what, 10:10 right now almost? So
Yep.
not much later than that. So if you have any questions for Kristine, you want to learn from Kristine or find out how to get into her next masterclass, make sure you ask that question. And I'm going to ask you about your printer behind you. That
Oh,
right
yeah.
there, tell us about it, because that's something that I'm a digital photographer only, it seems. I've had friends that tell me that I'm not a true photographer yet until I print something. And so what is it that you have and how much does it print and what medium?
Yeah, so this is Midnight.
Midnight.
It's a Canon Prograph. It's a P4100. So this is a 44-inch roll printer. Now I do have another smaller
44.
little
Wow.
13 by 19 here. I come from actually a film background. So I went to university for photography and it only had digital in the last year. So I did all film and I was printing in darkroom and etc. So my background is printing. I actually finally made a printing course because all my students kept asking me and I'm like, there's
Right.
so much to printing. Yeah, Jeannie used to say, and I offer a printing class too.
She did almost beat you.
She's she's on it. So yeah, the thing with Nova Scotia is that it's stunning and it's beautiful and it's lovely. And it's also kind of in the middle of nowhere and there's not a lot around here. So the options for printing here locally, there aren't a lot. There are some, but there aren't a lot. And with the specific type of paper that I wanted to use and different types of paper, so I print a lot of stuff on Moab. There's Slick Rock Pearl. So I have this one.
Whoa,
This is an
yes.
offset. It's big, hey?
Yeah, it
So this
is.
was actually going into a gallery. But
Cool.
this particular one had a very small little thing on it. So anyways, that one didn't. But I'm gearing up. I have another gallery show that I'm going to be a part of here in the next bit. And I knew that I wanted to take stuff and start printing more. I used to have access to 44-inch and 60-inch printers all the time with my previous job where I was a product designer and I ran the photography studio. And then I didn't have that anymore. And like, you know, the one place I could find in Canada that prints on this paper was in BC. For anyone who doesn't know Canadian geography, BC is on the other side of the country. So it's just like being able to print stuff was a big hurdle when I already know how to do all of it. I've been printing for over 15 years at this point, digitally at least, and longer if I go back to my darkroom days. So it's just kind of like, I already know how to do all of this. I don't want to work with a printing company. I just want to do it myself and not
Right.
have to wait like 2 weeks, et cetera, to bring things back. So I did this. I made it a big deal. Basically, I was like, hey, I'm going to buy like a $10,000 printer. And I did a huge, big print sale, and it was great. So I like to talk about, about monetizing and selling and putting our work out. But I did $23,000 in sales in just a couple of weeks to help me fund the printer. And then
Booyah.
I got to print a whole bunch of stuff, which was really, really cool.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, it was super awesome. Tons of people who are here and who are on it have some of my prints, which I'm always so grateful for. But it was also a part of it. I wanted to start exhibiting my work again and putting stuff in galleries and all of that. And to do that, like, I just, the gallery just sold a print for me the other day, and it's like, okay, well, we need this. So I print it and I get it to the place that mounts it and do it. So having this in-house is just huge. So I can print stuff big and I do it all the time, and it's really, really fun. You don't have to get something that big though. Like, you can get a smaller printer as well. There's lots of options out there. Generally, though, I'm going to recommend either Canon or Epson if you want to go with printers where you're going to choose papers that are going to have ICC profiles so that you can start to get in there and manage your color and get something consistent. You're going to want to be going with either a Canon or an Epson. But
Okay.
the whole reason I have a Canon is because that's the only one that I could find in the country. There were 0 Epsons in stock anywhere.
Wow.
My background is an Epson. So I just bought the Canon. And everyone's like, oh, you're getting a Canon, you're a Nikon photographer. It's like, I don't care about brands. I just
Exactly.
want the thing that lets me print really big, nice stuff. So,
Yeah, exactly. A
yeah.
tablecloth photo. Man,
Yeah, right.
when
Yeah.
people are
Yeah.
thinking about doing that themselves, what round number can you give us for what to expect when it comes to buying the printer and having at least a few months of printer and ink, paper and ink?
Oh, it depends what size you want to print. So like for this, the setup on this and to get paper and ink, it was about 14,000 for the whole thing.
Yikes.
Yeah, yeah. Now you see why I had to run a print sale. But I've got a
Yep.
smaller printer over here, which is a P100, and I have students who are looking at purchasing other ones, and they're in the $1,000 range. And then paper and ink is probably going to run you another, like if you're buying $1,000 printer, you're probably going to be running another $200 to $300 to get some paper and ink to get started going. It all depends what you're getting. There are papers that cost a lot more than other papers. And it just kind of depends what you're interested in printing, the medium, the type of image. So we're with Milky Way photography, you don't really want to be printing on matte paper. It's matte paper, there are beautiful matte papers out there, but you will find that you'll look at the image and be like, this isn't what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Because we're used to seeing stuff on like resin coated paper with some gloss and some sheen, and especially with night photography, that helps. So it all just kind of depends what your goals are. But you can also, like the small printer I have here is a Canon P100. Find one of those. How much was it? I think it was 700 when I bought it. They don't make it anymore. Find one of those that's on sale from someone that's a used one or something like that. And you can probably get something for even cheaper. So yeah.
Yeah, even cheaper than 14 grand. So, hey, look at that. So I'm on your website, Kristine. Before everyone goes, we're starting to get thank you so much for the presentation. Love you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very informative. With your website, if someone wanted to get into some of your courses, where would they find it? These online
They
classes?
would go there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So my courses are a little bit different because I run them cohort style and I only open up registration at certain times of the year. I should actually add my printing one to this now that I look at this.
Yeah, the
I
websites
talk
are
about
never updated.
It's updated. These are my two main courses.
Cool.
I don't do a lot. I do the same thing and I do it a lot of times. So my Milky Way Photography Masterclass, I run that twice a year. I'm going to be doing, that's coming in April, and then I'll do it again after the summer. I started doing a really cool thing with the Masterclass though. I run a 3-part live launch event called Your First Milky Way Photo, where people they actually get their first photo. Like I get thousands of people into these trainings, and they're out there and they're literally getting their first photo of the Milky Way. It's like the best energy ever. But I started live streaming me doing a Milky Way photo shoot. So this, if you do this and you click it, it puts your email in, and you get tagged with a little thing that goes on to say that you're interested in this. And when I open up registration for it, you can get through to it here. And I send out an email, basically. Awesome. Yeah. And I talk about this type of stuff on my podcast as well. So I have a podcast called After Dark Photography Podcast, which is all about Milky Way photography. Yeah, we'll get to it there. So I talk about this kind of stuff on there, and I'm always updating like whatever I'm doing and whatever's going on. So I have photo printing. If anyone is interested in printing and you want to learn about it, I have just 2 episodes back on that. And right now, the thing that I'm running, which is new, is I'm starting a business program for photographers. So for hobbyists who want to monetize. So that's a brand new thing. So that's kind of the stuff. So I kind of like run certain things here or there throughout the year. It's always fun.
Sweet. Awesome. So happy to have met you today, Kristine. Thank you so much for hanging out so late, despite the fact that Aurora's going off in Canada. You have someplace better to be, and yet you're hanging with us. So thanks so much for being here. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and for being a participant. Those of you who want to come join us and meet Kristine in person, come to the Nightscaper conference in May and look for that. The seats will be filling up, so make sure you get in on it. Jane St. John says, one of the best things I've ever done. She's an amazing teacher and a mentor. So that is big praise. So thank you so much. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Everybody have a great week. If you want to come back for Milky Way Wednesday, I'll be right here at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Otherwise, get back on that podcast, listen to After Dark, and listen to Kristine's voice for a few hours while you drive out to a scary, dark location for Milky Way. Exactly. So thanks, Kristine. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you all next Monday for another presentation. Later. Bye.